A very good evening to all my colleagues, students, and research assistants from across universities and colleges who are present here to attend the lecture. This happens to be the sixth lecture in our continuous series as organized by Association for the Discussion of Society and Politics. We had already done 5 previous lectures. All were related to the themes of politics and society. I mean, analyzing politics and society from respective point of views. Today's lecture is organized by our association, and our eminent speaker is Professor M.K. Pandhir from Aligarh Muslim University. He happens to be the professor of history over there in the Center for Advanced Studies related to the Department of History. His area of work is medieval archaeology, and he specializes in rural economy of Rajasthan. And he has a doctoral thesis on that, and he is a pioneer on that genre. I got to know it from my supervisor in JNU that he is a very good orator, and I am very hopeful that today's discussion, as Sir will provide us, it will definitely enlighten us to know more in depths about the intricacies of Indian national movement. Indian national movement, it happens to be one of the most unique and one of the most unique social movement in the history, in world history, because it cuts across the several obstacles, several hindrances of race, caste, sex, religion, language, geographical boundaries, whatnot and whatsoever. Because the national movement in contemporary Indian scenario, to organize a national movement in the contemporary 1947 world in a heterogeneous country like India, was essentially a unique endeavor. And it's not just a unique endeavor from the point of view of the national movement in 1947. It also is important so far as the aftermath of 1947 goes. I mean, the post-independent time. The post-independent era, the Indian state, particularly democracy and Indian state, owes a lot to the Indian national movement, as the national movement in some sort of a way provided a training in democracy that people have and that people endure so far the democratic guidelines as provided by the national movement. So the national movement in one sense also provided a guideline, so to say, a vision of the post-independent state. This is very relevant to any student of history, political science, English, sociology, philosophy, whatever, because it offers a vision of the India in which we are living today. With this, I'll end my English introductory session. Now, with Sir's permission, I would like to say a few words in Bengali for the introduction. শুভ সন্ধ্যা সমস্ত আমার এখানে উপস্থিত সহকর্মী, রিসার্চ স্কলার, আমার স্টুডেন্টস, যারা সমস্ত বিভিন্ন কলেজ ও ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে এখানে এসেছেন, জয়েন করেছেন। এটা আমাদের অ্যাসোসিয়েশন ফর দ্য ডিসকাশন অফ সোসাইটি অ্যান্ড পলিটিক্সের দ্বারা অর্গানাইজ করা ষষ্ঠ লেকচার সিরিজের মধ্যে এটা ষষ্ঠতম। এর আগে আমাদের যে সমস্ত বিষয়ের উপর লেকচারগুলি অর্গানাইজ করা হয়েছে সবকটাই মোটামুটি রাজনৈতিক ও সামাজিক বিষয়ের উপর, এবং বিভিন্ন প্রেক্ষিত থেকে বিভিন্ন দৃষ্টিকোণ থেকে সেই সমস্ত বক্তৃতাগুলো আমাদের কাছে এসে পৌঁছেছে, এবং বিভিন্ন জায়গা থেকে আমরা সেই বক্তৃতাগুলো থেকে নানাভাবে আমাদের রসদ, বৈজ্ঞানিক রাজনৈতিক চিন্তা ভাবনার ও পর্যালোচনার রসদ পেয়েছি। আজকের বক্তা হচ্ছেন প্রফেসর M.K. Pandhir। তিনি সেন্টার ফর অ্যাডভান্স স্টাডিজ, আলিগড় মুসলিম ইউনিভার্সিটির হিস্ট্রির অধ্যাপক। উনি মূলত আজকে যেটা নিয়ে বলবেন সেটা হচ্ছে ভারতের জাতীয় আন্দোলন, ইন্ডিয়ান ন্যাশনাল মুভমেন্ট। ভারতের জাতীয় আন্দোলন এটা আমাদের একটা সামাজিক আন্দোলন হিসেবেও যদি আমরা দেখি, ঐতিহাসিক আন্দোলন হিসেবেই দেখি, এটা বিশ্বের ইতিহাসে এক অনন্য আন্দোলন। তার কারণ এটা এমন এক প্রেক্ষিতে এই আন্দোলনটি সংগঠিত হয়েছিল যেখানে ভারতবর্ষ একটা সম্পূর্ণ সব দিক থেকে দেখতে গেলে অসম দেশ, ভাষাগত, বর্ণগত, ধর্মগত, লিঙ্গগত এবং ভৌগোলিক অবস্থানগত সব দিক দিয়ে দেখলে এরকম একটা অসম পরিবেশে, অসম দেশে, যেখানে জাতীয়তাবাদের উন্মেষ থেকে শুরু করে একটা রাজনৈতিক পরিকাঠামোর সচেতনতার উন্মেষ অনেক দেরিতে এসেছে, সেরকম একটা দেশে এই রকম একটা আন্দোলন সংগঠন করা, এবং শুধু সংগঠন করা নয়, একটা একটা বিশাল পরিমাণ, একটা বিশাল সংখ্যক মানুষকে, জনগণকে এর মধ্যে অংশগ্রহণ করানো একটা অনন্য কার্যাবলী ছিল, রাজনৈতিক দিক থেকে, ঐতিহাসিক দিক থেকে, সামাজিক দিক থেকে, সব দিক থেকে। এই আন্দোলনটি শুধুমাত্র আমাদের 1947 সালের পরিপ্রেক্ষিতেই সামঞ্জস্যপূর্ণ নয়, আজকের দিনে আমরা যে ভারতবর্ষে দাঁড়িয়ে আছি এর ক্ষেত্রেও এর কিছু না অনেকটাই সামঞ্জস্য আছে। তার কারণ এই আন্দোলনের মারফতে আমাদের ভবিষ্যতের রাষ্ট্রের যে একটা দৃষ্টিকোণ সেটা আমরা পাই। বলা যেতে পারে আমাদের গণতন্ত্রের প্রশিক্ষণ মোটামুটি এই জাতীয় আন্দোলন থেকেই শুরু হয়ে যায়, এবং জাতীয় আন্দোলন শুধুমাত্র একটা আন্দোলন নয়, একটা ভিশন, একটা দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি ভবিষ্যৎ ভারতীয় রাষ্ট্রের ক্ষেত্রে। সুতরাং আজকের দিনে আমরা যে ভারতবর্ষে আছি, কেন এর কি দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি, কোথায় গণতন্ত্র, কিভাবে গণতন্ত্র এসেছে, এই সমস্ত প্রশ্নগুলোর উত্তর বোধহয় এই ভারতীয় জাতীয় আন্দোলনের পর্যালোচনায় লুকিয়ে আছে, যেটা আমরা আজকে স্যারের বক্তৃতার মাধ্যমে অবশ্যই পাবো। এই বলে আমি আমার সংক্ষিপ্ত বক্তব্য শেষ করছি এবং আমার হেড অফ দ্য ডিপার্টমেন্ট অধ্যাপক আশিস নন্দী স্যারকে অনুরোধ করছি উনি যদি একটু দুটো কথা বলেন এবং তারপর আমরা মূল সেশনে চলে যাব।
আচ্ছা ঋতব্রতা, আমি একটু বাংলাতে তো বলবো, একটুখানি ওনার জন্য ইংরেজিতে বলি, তারপর সংক্ষেপে একটু বাংলায় বলি। Sir, I do cordially welcome you and every participant in this webinar. I thank you, Professor Pandit. You have accepted the main organizers of this lecture series during this pandemic situation. So they, particularly Ovik and Humayun, deserve special appreciation.
Yes.
We all know that Indian national movement is a very interesting and important part of our syllabus. I believe that it is very, very important to know the different phases, the ups and downs, the approaches, the role of the peasants and workers, the leftists and the socialists, causes of India's partition, etc., in order to gain knowledge about our historical and cultural heritage. Professor Pandit is an eminent resource person in this field, as far I know, and his deliberation surely would enlighten you all. So you must listen to the valuable speech very attentively. And now I would request Mr. Pandit to start your speech. Before that, I want to say something in Bengali, very few words. আজকে উপস্থিত অধ্যাপক পন্ডিত আলিগড় মুসলিম ইউনিভার্সিটির অধ্যাপক, তাকে স্বাগত জানাই, এবং আমাদের এই লেকচার সিরিজে যারা যারা অংশগ্রহণ করেছেন, বিশেষ করে আমার ছাত্রছাত্রী, তাদের প্রত্যেককে আমি স্বাগত জানাই। তোমরা সবাই জানো, আপনারা সবাই জানেন যে আজকের বিষয়, উনি মূলত ইতিহাসের মানুষ, কিন্তু যে বিষয়টা উনি বলবেন সেই বিষয়টা ইন্টারডিসিপ্লিনারি, পার্টিকুলারলি আমাদের তো সিলেবাসের অনেকটা জায়গা জুড়েই আছে। বিশেষ করে যে সিলেবাস, সেটা পুরোটাই ইন্ডিয়ান ন্যাশনাল মুভমেন্টের উপর, এবং অনেক অনেক বিষয় আছে যেগুলো আমরাও, অ্যাজ বিকজ উই আর নট দ্য স্টুডেন্টস অফ হিস্ট্রি, অনেক কিছু আছে যেগুলো আমরা ভালো করে জানি না। আমি আশা করছি আজকে ওনার এই আলোচনা সেই দিকগুলোর উপর আলোকপাত করবে, এবং আমি সবাইকে বলবো যে খুব মনোযোগ দিয়ে ওনার বক্তব্য শুনুন। এরপরে যদি প্রশ্ন কিছু থাকে, সেই নিয়মগুলো বোধহয় বলে দেওয়া হয়েছে বা বিজ্ঞতা বলে দেবে, সেই অনুসারে আপনারা প্রশ্ন করবেন। মানে যারা ইংরেজিতে করতে পারবেন সরাসরি করতে পারেন, হিন্দিতে হলেও অসুবিধা নাই, আর যদি বাংলায় হয় বিজ্ঞতার কাছে ওই চ্যাট বক্সে আপনারা প্রশ্নগুলো দিয়ে দেবেন, বিজ্ঞতা এগুলো স্যারের কাছে দিয়ে দেবেন। Thank you all. I would request Professor Pandit to start your lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashish Nandi, for such a nice introduction. And I also thankful to Ritu Roy, madam. And first of all, it's my prime duty to pay thanks to the organizer of this academic lecture series. They have given me a very important opportunity to address the students in other part of the area. And, you know, I'm also thankful to the Association for Discussion of Politics and Society. And I hope I will do my work as per your expectations. Okay. You know, I have been asked to deliver a lecture on Indian national movement. Indian national movement, no doubt, is unparalleled in the world history. None of the country has such type of the struggle for independence. Apart from it, India is unique. A large number of the, you can say, experiments took place during the course of the Indian national movement. And during this Indian national movement, we emerged as a nation. We emerged as a India. I'm not talking in the context that India also existed before that, but in true sense, this Indian national movement emerged, Indian national movement transformed us as a nation that is known as India. Today, I have to discuss something very, you can say, peculiar to this Indian national movement. I think, dear students, you have gone through a large number of the books on Indian national movement, all full of factual information, all narrating different movements took place and how the causes and consequences of the so many movements, the British Indian government's role, and how Gandhi emerges on the scene, and ultimately you can say the fate of Indian national movement from 1990 to 1947 is known as Gandhian era. And Gandhi, a very rare personality, which was the product of, vice versa, Gandhi was the product of this Indian national movement, and Indian national movement was the product of the Gandhi. And you know, a large number of the scholars, they attempted to interpret this movement, not by only giving the chronologically all the episodes, they never only give the events in a chronological order. Okay, but they also interpret the nature of this movement. Consequently, what was happening, a number of the school emerges that define the Indian national movement in different perspective. In other words, a large number of the scholars, they attempted to define this Indian national movement as per their own perception. And in whatever way they perceive this Indian national movement, and they define it. Meaning by today I would like to deal a different, and you can say a large number of the approaches generally took place to define, to explain this Indian national movement. I incorporated almost all of the school which emerges, they gave a different meaning to this Indian national movement. And my dear students, you have gone through a large number of the books. Sometimes even you fail to make point, okay, what type of the things, what type of the ideological framework you have gone through, and you understand the Indian national movement. And these 4 or 5 schools emerges in the course of time. And I'm not emphasizing only one school. I'm not declaring one school is very important in interpreting this movement. No, all schools interpreted this movement, and all these interpretations came in together and formed the Indian national movement. So I start from the imperialist school. Without explaining the imperialist school, we cannot think the development of other ideological approach to define this Indian national movement. You know, what is imperialist approach to the Indian national movement? You know, imperialist is approach not started from the time of the movement, when this movement and Indian national movement starts. No, It existed from the very time when the Britishers, they started to establish on this plane, on this any geographical, on this in this country. And what is the perception of the imperialist? They justified the British rule. They declared that this colonial rule in India is in the process of the fulfillment of a mission to enlighten the ignored people. Just think, they considered their rule as a blessing for the Indians. And what was happened? A large number of the historians, in explaining this phase, they criticize the indigenous society and culture. They have no respect for the Indian culture and society. Though it's a different case, a group among them emerges that pleaded the case that we should study the Indian culture if we want to rule the India effectively, that is known as Orientalist. These imperialists in writing always praises the Western culture, and they glorify only those peoples who helped in establishing the British rule in India. And apart from it, what they consider about themselves, they consider that they are the fittest to rule India. And in meaning by they apply the social Darwinism in India in their rule. And what happened with this starting? They establish some sort of the Pax Britannica. Pax Britannica means that they are here to bring the law and order, and this law and order was necessary for this anarchist society. Whatever I'm talking, it creates a lot of agony, even us. But British rule is totally depend on all these perceptions. Some group started to emerge within this that is known as Orientalist, like William Jones and so many peoples. They believe in the superiority of the Britishers. But on the other hand, they also pleaded that Indian culture should be studied. And without knowing the Indian society and culture, without having a good understanding of the Indian society and culture, we cannot rule India effectively. Okay? It looks like they favored the Indian society and culture. No. They only favored to study the Indian society and culture to rule India effectively. And with this background, Indian national movement started in India. The first reaction, the first school which encountered this imperialist notion emerges in India, that is nationalist school. This nationalist school declared the British rule as a curse to India. They don't have any faith. The follower of the nationalist school, the scholars who followed the nationalist schools, they never considered British rule as a blessing to India. They are of the opinion, even their writings clearly depicted that British Indian rule is only serving the interest of Britain or British. They never do anything for the benefit of the Indians. Some can claim that the British introduced a administrative unification as well as the railway. But both things, first of all, at the first point, they serve the British interest. They have no interest in India's well-being. They introduced the railway. You know very well, everything is clear to you, my dear students. They introduced the railway to capture the market, to collect the raw material from the interior area. On the other hand, administrative, you can say the structure created by the Britishers, this structure was created to make the British rule effective. And because of this administrative system, these Britishers, they ruled India so many times. These nationalists, they, in their writing, they clearly reflect this Indian national movement is spreading the awareness at the first point, and they also spreading the awareness relating the exploitative nature of the colonial rule. Very true. When you have gone through the writings of the nationalist, I think you may immediately get convinced with it. And what was happened, these nationalists, they systematize their critiques to the colonial rule. This is a starting, this is a first starting. This nationalist school came up in counter of imperialist school. This nationalist school also systematized their critics, also gave a very detailed criticism of each and every aspect of the British Indian rule, whether it's a economy, whether it's a social system, whether it's a cultural system. They exposed on all points. In the beginning, these two schools are existing and they attempted to reconstruct the history as per their own way. But slowly, when this Indian national movement started to grow and registered a development, other schools started to emerge. And for example, very soon, Marxist school came in origin. So far as the Indian national movement is concerned, Marxists visualize a contradiction, primary contradiction between British rule on one hand and Indian people on the other hand. They considered it as a conflict between the exploiters and exploited. They divided the whole Indian national movement in two groups. But on the other hand, these Marxist historians, they never neglected the inner contradiction existing among the Indians. They consider them as a class, and they are in interpreting the Indian national movement, they always gave the economic cause. Marxism started each and everything from the economy. And, from the very beginning, British, they were exploiting Indian economy. A lot of drain of wealth continue from India to England. And they interpreted each and everything in the context of the Marxism. And they went to such an extent that they defined the national movement as a structured bourgeois movement. It is not all class character. Marx in writing about the Indians also discussed that if colonialism is having a destructive role, it is also having a regenerative role. Somewhere, somewhat, these Marxist historians get little bit confused, but they visualize, they define this Indian national movement in that equation. Is that clear? Then, with the passage of the time, another very, very important school came up that is known as Cambridge School. Cambridge School is a collection of the work done by some foreigners and Indians at Cambridge. Most important name here came of Anil Singh. He defined the whole Indian national movement in a very fantastic way. He was of the opinion, rather we should say that Cambridge School writers are of the opinion, there is no real contradiction existed between imperialism and Indian people. They ruled out that something like Indian national movement exists in India. They are of the opinion that the central contradiction existed not between the British and Indians, but among the Indians. How they prove that? They put forward a very beautiful, you can say, the hypothesis, or they attempted to justify their hypothesis by citing a large number of the examples and episodes. You know, they put forward that English education was introduced by Britishers. This English education gave the birth to the new middle class in India. I emphasize that this English education gave the was instrumental to originate the new middle class among Indians. And this, in the course of time, this new middle class clamored for the political representation, meaning by Britishers offer post to these Indian middle class, to these English educated class in various institutions, like in university. They offered, Britishers offered, when they established the municipal councils, they offered the seats for the Indians. And when they established the provincial assemblies in 1919 and onwards, then these seats have been offered for Indians. But you know, there is a, as per the Cambridge school, these seats, these offers are very limited. Few posts are existing for this middle class. What was its consequences? Its consequences is that a intense rivalry, a competition emerges among these English educated new middle class. They uses the word elite for this English educated new middle class. Now, what was happening in the rivalry, in the competition? These educated Indians, these newly emerged middle class got, you can say, developed a contradiction, and they competed with each other on the basis of the caste, community and religion. Cambridge School outrightly rejected the Marxist perception that it's a class struggle. No. It means they are of the, they put forward their opinion that Indian national movement, whatever you are reading, it's a fake. So far as the non-cooperation movement is concerned, so far as the civil disobedience movement is concerned, new constitutions, new acts, Quit India movements, a large number of the things have been happened in India. These all are fake. If they exist, so it's a rivalry, it's a competition, it's a clash between among the Indians. Or Indians, they qualified these Indians with an English educated new middle class, and there is no real Indian national movement exist in India. Whatever happening, whatever is going on, whatever you are studying as an Indian national movement, it's a competitions, it's a clashes among these newly emerged middle class. Even they declared the leaders of the Indian national movement who led the Indian national movement. You have a long list of the leaders, Gandhi, Nehru, before that, Tilak, Dadabhai Naoroji. From all these leaders, they declared these all are disgruntled people. If first they went to British to serve their interest, if they are not, if they became, you can say, they failed to get any favor, then they started to clamor, they started to discuss, they started to emerge such type of the things. These all are disgruntled people. They want to serve their interest, so such sort of the things like Indian national movement started in India. You know, is there, it's a complete truth? No. Even these Cambridge school historians also, when he discussed Dadabhai Naoroji, he want to live in England, London, So he was to get this opportunity, to get this facility, and he want to facilitate their residing in London. So they started to write about poverty and un-British rule of India. They want to pressurize on the British government, explaining the Indian national movement in such a way. Cambridge School came near to imperialist school. Cambridge School, though developed very late, it developed in the mid of during the second quarter of the 20th century. And the supervisor of the NLC is John Gallagher. And he propounded a very good thesis. It's an inner weakness of the Asia and Africa that was responsible for the colonized them, colonial rule of the British. It's an extension. But though you are reading the nationalist history here, though you are reading the other history here, but Cambridge history, Cambridge perception of Indian national movement is still held relevant in the Cambridge and in the Europe. We have to address it. We have to understand the whole perception of this Cambridge school about the Indian national movement. Along with this Cambridge school, we have also another very important school that is having a late school is the Subaltern School. Subaltern School, explained the Indian national movement in the context that this movement is between a contradiction is between elite and subaltern. I think everybody is versed with this subaltern. आप लोग सब subalterns को जानते होंगे. These are the marginalized group, depressed classes, also among one of them, peasants, so many groups which are marginalized. And as per the historians of subaltern, Indian national movement is between elite and subaltern. What is elite? Here, the definition in the definition of the elite, subaltern historians includes the British plus Indian elites. Followed my point? Here, they are now explaining Indian national movement in the context of the clash between elite and subaltern. Here the elite is not only British. Here the elite, Indian elite is also there. Indian bourgeois, Indian rural elite, all they club with this British. And they are now, so far as the Indian national movement is concerned, Indian national movement is a movement of the subaltern. What was happened there is this elite class, this elite, including British and Indians, this elite class, whatever Indian national movement was being run by this elite class, especially Indian elite class, it is totally different from the people's politics from the subaltern groups. Meaning by, along with this Indian national movement, parallel subaltern domain of politics exists in India. It is not this parallel subaltern politics is not influenced by this elite politics. This subaltern politics is totally independent and self-generating dynamics. It is totally, but you know what was happened? Whatever has been created, whatever has been developed by the subaltern, it was hijacked by the elites. It was hijacked by the elites. And you know, the subaltern historians, they gave a large number of the examples, and they considered the official leadership of Congress as an elite. These elite always want to remain in power. So they are creating such type of the things. In other words, we can say, as per the subaltern school, we have two different movements. One real anti-imperialist movement, politics of the subalterns. Pay attention. There are two different movements as per the subaltern historians exist in India. One is the real anti-imperialist movement of the subaltern. On the other hand, the second movement as per the subaltern school is the bogus national movement of the elite. They have also doubt the existence of the national movement. They declared this Indian national movement as a bogus. They discuss the difference between elite politics as well as the subaltern politics. They are of the opinion that subalterns, their mobilization is horizontal, which created such type of the movement, such type of the spontaneous, such type of the, you can say, national movements, while elite believe in a vertical mobilization. The so-called bogus national movement of the elite is a legalistic and pacific. It's not a real. They never want to free the India. They are more conscious and controlled by this elite. While on the other hand, subalterns, their mobilization is violent and spontaneous. Now you think, in the non-cooperation movement, Gandhi experimented with his own methodology and a mass mobilization took place. Peasants participated in non-cooperation movement on a large scale. And in the course of time, Dalits also participated, who were the well-known subalterns. They are also participated in the non-cooperation movement. Women, they also participated in the non-cooperation movement. You can say, now you can say it's a bogus national movement. It's a bogus non-cooperation movement. Ranjit Guha, and he was responsible to augment this subaltern school in India. And one more point, is it a spontaneous movement? No. Gandhi planned the whole movement. Just after the First World War, created such type of the region that gave birth to the Khilapat and non-cooperation movement. Gandhi planned each and everything. Gandhi came back in 1915 and established the Sabarmati Ashram in 1916, and he experimented. He got the first-hand information in Champaran, Ahmedabad mill strike, Kheda movement, and very soon he got an opportunity in Khilapat movement to mobilize the Indians. He got an opportunity in Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Acts. And you know, the economy, the First World War gave the severe blow to the economy. And all these causes come together and gave birth to the non-cooperation movement. It was a very systematic, you know, the All India Khilapat conference It was established in November 1919. And very soon, the Congress also espoused the cause and raised the issue from the Congress platform. Non-cooperation started. Is it a subaltern movement? If we testify, if we are using the paradigm of the subaltern as discussed by the subaltern historians, is it a subaltern school? It's a subaltern movement. How you define that Gandhi mobilized peasants? It's a strategy of the Gandhi that mobilized the peasants, that mobilized, in the course of time, the number of the Dalits participated in these movements of the Indian national struggle increases. Gandhi addressed to them. In a recent work, Judith Brown declared the Gandhi and imposed a thesis of the subcontractor theory. Gandhi is having a different type of the lynching and different type of the they develop a subcontractors among the leadership and this and that, this and that. May I know one thing? What type of the people associated with Gandhi who participated in different movements of the Indian national movement? On one hand, Motilal Nehru, who led a very aristocratic life. On the other hand, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. If you discuss the civil disobedience movement, all groups, all sections of the Indian society get mobilized. They participated in it. If you have gone through the papers, daily newspapers, from 12th March to 6th April, when this Dandi March undertook by Gandhi, you come to know what type of the people gave the response to the Gandhi, to this Dandi March. And to your surprise, all the subaltern groups, they also participated in it. But this second civil disobedience movement can never be declared as a violent, can never be declared as a spontaneous. Leadership is pacific. This school, though developed on a large scale, but still we have a lot of shortcomings. I can claim this school is not providing a true picture of Indian national movement. Among these, in these schools, few more schools emerges. A communalist school also emerged. A communalist school. And the basis of this communalist school is totally on the textbook of the colonial era, where the British and where these colonial rulers, they declared that the Hindu Muslim, they always remain having a hostile relations. And to your surprise, whenever Gandhi receded to the background, such sort of the things started to emerge in India. If you go through from 1922 to 1927, this phase is also known for the establishment of some religious, you can say, organizations. Simbaj happened after the second civil disobedience from, if you go through the history of the period from 1933, 34, 30, and onwards, 1933, until the Second World War, starting of the Second World War, though with the establishment of the Congress ministry, this period is also known for that. Now, these religious organizations and some regional organizations, may I invite the subaltern historians whether these are the subaltern groups? This is a subaltern revolution. This is a subaltern horizontal, violent and spontaneous reaction. No, not at all. We are, the communalist school also tried to interpret the Indian national movement. But my dear student, you know, these schools still persist in the historiography of Indian national movement. You, whenever you conduct any research on the Indian national movement, whenever you go through any book on Indian national movement, I think it is very necessary, आपके लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि आप जाने कि ये किसने लिखी है, क्या वो किसी पर्टिकुलर प्रिंसिपल से इंडोक्ट्रिनेट है या नहीं. You have gone through the Bipin Chandra's book. Bipin Chandra furnished a factual information, events, each and everything. I think, my dear students, don't indoctrinate yourself with these schools. You discover yourself. Sometime we go through the poverty and unbritish rule of the Dadabhai Naoroji. I got convinced. Okay, he gave a very good, you can say, the explain discussion on the brain of wealth. He gave arguments. He gave a statistical evidences. On the other hand, if we go through Rajni Palm Dutt book, R.C. Datta's book, you get a very good statistics there. In my opinion, these schools, they addresses one or two aspects of the whole gamut of the Indian national movement. Indian national movement is something bigger. You cannot summarize Indian national movement in one or two definitions. If you discuss, if you focus on the Gandhian era from 1990 to 1947, to your surprise, when I was not, I didn't go through the writings of Gandhi, I never liked Gandhi. But when I started to read about the Gandhi, about the Indian national movement as a student, as a teacher, and to your surprise, Indian national movement is really unique. You may consider my this opinion that I am talking too much about Gandhi, but may I know, if you minus the Gandhi from the Indian national movement, from the especially from the phase that is from starts from 1919 to 1947. Now you yourself think, what is Indian national movement? Today you are having a full-fledged country. You don't have any single leader that can prevail in the time of communal Lloyd, that can prevail in the time of anarchy, that can, you don't have any single leader presently that can address each and every problem of the country. But Gandhi did it. Gandhi is a fake as per the Cambridge school. To some extent, I agree with the Marxist school that there is a clash, there is a struggle between exploited and exploiters, and ultimately these exploiters, exploiters, they became exploited. They became a revolution. They introduced a revolution in the form of as a consequence of their class struggles, and then we go for the socialist society, and ultimately communism took place here. Britishers came here for their economic interest, and the first, their economic wrath was, Bengal was first to face it. And Gandhi visualized the things. He introduced a very systematic Indian national, a movement against the Britishers. In non-cooperation, he limited himself up to the non-cooperation. up to the boycott of the school, college, high courts, courts. And now you see, after almost 10 years, he introduced the second stage when you started to disobey the British rule, British system in the form of a second civil disobedience movement. It's a systematic evolution of the Indian national movement. Now, when you approach it in 1942, excuse me, you know, 1942 is the climax of Gandhian strategy. Gandhi gave the slogan, do and die. And you know what? If you start from 1919, reach up to 1942, almost within a 23 years, Indians are well versed in their strategy. Gandhi was successful in teaching the Indians about their you can say methods of the struggle. I agree, Gandhi adopted truce and struggle and truce. And Gandhi can be defined by any school. Some even Cambridge school defined the Gandhi as a belonging to the bourgeois class. Is it true? Never. It is never can be concluded on the available information. And do you think Britishers in 1942 and this phase which started from 1919 to 1947 is a great phase. It not only on one side wage a war, wage a struggle to get India free. On the other hand, it's a development of the constitutional India. Now you see, Congress, even independence was not granted, but Congress started to develop their fundamental. Okay, what should be the fundamental rights Indian must have after the independence? What should be other things? And this phase created the India. Declaring this phase, India was created during this phase. It doesn't mean India never exists. India exists. But this democracy, and this constitutions, all, and whatever we now in the system we are living, this system is a product of this phase from 1919 to 1947. It may be possible in the coming days, more schools, more interpretations of Indian national movement came. But one thing, my dear student, एक चीज आप हमेशा माइंड में रखिएगा, factual information, events, इनकी analysis remain the same. Nationalist school will never lose its glamour. ऐसा नहीं कि कोई हम नेशनलिस्ट स्कूल को बहुत जबरदस्ती सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं. It is having also some shortcomings, but I think this India, present India, is the product of Indian national movement. Not by throwing these Britishers, no, but by developing the nation, constitutions, even some, you can say the social system has also been addressed during this phase. One you can say accident took place with us. With this political freedom, we stopped our social and religious and cultural reformation. We stopped. This accident took place with India. Otherwise, I think all these reforms which have initiated during this phase must continue, must have been continued. With these concluding remarks, I prefer to stop here. Now I invite students to raise questions. Ashish sir, Dr. Nandi.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The students are ready to ask you questions, sir.
Yeah, of course.
So many questions are there. Ritoputra will communicate you.
You know, I'm ready to answer. Even students raise 1,000 questions.
Okay, sir. Ritoputra, প্রশ্নগুলো স্যারকে বলো।
Anybody?
Sir, I have a small question.
Yeah.
Sir, thank you for your presentation. I'll get I am Nirjar Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of Political Science, Baharampur College. I would like to ask, you were talking about this idea that India existed much before British rule. Can you substantiate this? If India existed before British rule, was this a cultural entity or a literary entity? Was it a universal entity, or what? In what sense did India before British rule? Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Mukherjee, India always exists as a geographical unit. You know, this subcontinent is having a different boundaries, closed on 2 or 3 sides. India is also earlier during the ancient period, India as a nation, not nation, I must not use the word nation, as a country existed under the Mauryans and even under the Guptas. In the Sanskrit word, Bharatvarsh have been used regularly for it. And in the early medieval period, some Persian sources clearly indicate, you know, this Hindustan here, this India word, why it is existed, why it emerges. It originated to indicate the area, to indicate the country existing beyond that. During the medieval period, you know, 2 or 3 empires crisscross the whole subcontinents. Even their boundaries goes beyond to the Hindu Kush. You followed my point? It's not only a cultural identity. I'm not following here the present political party's views. No, it's my own researches. You know, in Sanskrit sources of the Gupta period, even some sources belongs to preceding to the Gupta period, they uses this word Bharatvarsh. Is that clear, Dr. Mukherjee?
Yes, sir, a short supplemental question. So the idea of Sapta-Sindhu or Mauryan Empire or Gupta Empire or Bharatvarsh, are these are these the same? What were the geographical extents of these areas? You have correctly said that this cannot be called the idea of a nation. But as a civilization, can you say these are the same civilizations, or there are continuities or discontinuities? As far as geography is concerned, does it actually refer to Kashmir to Kanyakumari, or were these rather limited areas in northern India? Because as we know, Maurya Empire and Gupta Empire, they were based on empire, that is imperial rule, not the base of any ideology or consensual rule. So your opinion, please.
You know, so far as the Mauryan and Mughal Empire are concerned, now you tell me one thing. They captured the whole of the subcontinents, okay, and
Yes,
they also captured some area beyond the continent just to safeguard it. Gandhar, Kabul, during the Mauryan period, was the part of India.
right. No, but the idea is, was there anything such as India? We know that places like Cambodia, Gandhar, Afghanistan area of today, Cambodia, Gandhar, these areas were part of Maurya Empire, Gupta Empire, so many empires. But Bengal, Tamil Nadu, all these places are part of these empires. We all know, definitely. sir. But the thing is, can this be called a part of India? For example, today, a person from Bengal will call a person from Tamil Nadu or a person from Punjab his countryman. We are all Indians. But was this fellow feeling there in the ancient times, be it Maurya or Sultanate or Mughal or Vijayanagara? Thank you, sir.
Um, you, you know, if you take the example of Mughal Empire, they carried their military expeditions and captured almost all of the part of the Indian subcontinent. Now, may I ask one thing, how they keep this area under one rule? You followed my question?
No. Yes,
Huh?
I understand. But Professor, the thing is, empire
Sometime-
don't even.
Dr. Mukherjee, sometime culture was being used to keep the country, sometime army, sometime cultural victory, sometime the various component of the society remain the same, sometime epics, sometime the social traditions. You know, all these contributed in the formation of the country.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, if I may ask a short question once again, Professor. Like
Yeah.
we understand, Professor, that empires try to do a lot of things to keep the empire together. But the difference between an empire and a nation, and you have very correctly said that India in ancient time cannot be called a nation. But the thing is, Professor, that any empire, be it Maurya Empire or Chola Empire or Gupta Empire or any Sultanate, Mughal, anything, empires, none of these empires were homogeneous in their culture, nor were they homogeneous in religion. Then what?
Correct.
Then the thing.
Many, you are correct. But may I know one thing? Nation is the recent origin. Nation, this concept has the recent origin.
Right.
What's about the England? Do you think England is a nation state today?
Yes.
And this nation state is also emerged on the degree on the empire. But you know, in case of the England, how an empire get accommodated the nation state? Still monarchy is there?
Yes. Constitutional monarchy. Yeah, constitutional monarchy.
is there, but at least the empire is still exists there.
Yes.
And though it's a symbolic, but it is exist there. So you
Yes.
know,
Thank
so
you, sir.
many- Okay.
Thank you, sir. I think the other students should ask now.
Okay.
I think before moving on to my colleague Nirjar Mukherjee has already started with the question answer session. But anyways, what I try to do after each, we try to do after each academic lecture is that I try to present a brief summary of what has been said so far by the eminent speaker. And today also I'll be doing that in a very brief timing. So, sir, first of all, started with the various traditions of various traditions that are associated with national movement. I mean, the traditions that ultimately gave the nationalist fervor to the movement. Imperialist tradition, Marxist tradition, nationalist tradition. He spoke of all this tradition, and then the consequent schools. The schools are basically is what brings up the criticality of the study, the complexity, the contestation, everything is enthoped by as soon as the schools comes in question, because the schools are nothing, they are also ways of analyzing the traditions. And this is where there is divergence, there is convergence, there is continuity, there is break in between the different traditions, as mentioned by sir. Basically, the Cambridge and the Imperialist school, there may be some sort of a convergence between them, but there is complete divergence when we look about the Cambridge, the subaltern, and then later on the Gandhian experiment. Gandhi, sir has placarded it very well. that it's not easy to define the Gandhian experiment in terms of any of the Western schools and Western traditions that we know, because it's a unique experiment. That's why I said that the Indian national movement, if I'm wrong, sir, you may correct me, the Indian national movement, as we know from the Gandhian perspective, is unique. It's not unique on the sense that it was a movement against a colonial rule, which happened to take place in several other places. But in case of Gandhi, it was a movement. At the same time, it was a dialogue also with the colonial empire, with the colonial rule. This dialogue is something that is unique to the Indian movement. At the same time, a protest and a dialogue. Now, I'll summarize again about the mobilization of the mass mobilization that took place, but there also there was a contestation of some segments feeling that the other segment was mobilized in a better way or in a more hierarchical manner. That was again a different question. And then as my colleague Nirjhar, he put it, the fact of empire versus nation, which is again a debate. I think the national movement again contributes to this debate in opening up later academic venues, later academic researches about the debate between empire, state, nation. Has there been no nationalist fervor, no nationalist movement, I think this debate wouldn't have come into social science so far. So please rectify me if I'm wrong in any ways. So sir's lecture today has enlightened us on all these aspects of national movement: the fervor, the contestations, the divergence, the convergence, the opposition, and the assimilation. আমি এবার একটু বাংলায় একটু সামারি করে দিচ্ছি স্যারের বক্তৃতাটা। স্যার প্রথমে যেটা দিয়ে শুরু করলেন যে বিভিন্ন ট্র্যাডিশনগুলো, যে বিভিন্ন ধারাগুলো আমাদের জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলনই শুধু না, জাতীয়তাবাদ একটা মতাদর্শ হিসেবে যে বিভিন্ন ধারাগুলির সমাহার, সে সমস্ত ধারাগুলো ইম্পিরিয়ালিস্ট ধারা, তারপর আসছে জাতীয়তাবাদী ধারা, মার্ক্সবাদী ধারা, এবং এই ধারাগুলোর থেকে আসছে যে সমস্ত সমন্বিত স্কুলগুলো। এই স্কুলগুলো কিছুই না, এই স্কুলগুলো হচ্ছে বিভিন্ন দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি যেগুলো এই ধারাগুলিকে পর্যালোচনা করে, সমগ্র জাতীয়তাবাদ মতাদর্শ হিসেবে, রাজনৈতিক আন্দোলন হিসেবে পর্যালোচনা করে। এবং এই যে বিভিন্ন দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি যেগুলো জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলনকে, জাতীয়তাবাদ মতাদর্শকে পর্যালোচনা করে, এইখানেই শুরু হয় রাজনৈতিক তর্ক বিতর্ক বা রাজনীতির যে খেলাটা। ঐতিহাসিক রাজনীতিও যদি হয়, অর্থনৈতিক রাজনীতিও যদি হয়, সামাজিক রাজনীতিও যদি হয়, এই যে দৃষ্টিভঙ্গিগুলো পর্যালোচনা করছে এদের মারফতই সেই রাজনীতিটা বেরিয়ে আসে। মূলত এই দৃষ্টিভঙ্গিগুলো কিছু কিছু জায়গায় একে অপরের সাথে সম্মিলিত হচ্ছে, কিছু কিছু জায়গায় একে অপরের থেকে বিচ্যুত হচ্ছে, কিছু কিছু জায়গায় তারা ঐতিহাসিকভাবে একটা কন্টিনিউটি মানে একটা ধারাবাহিকতা বজায় রাখছে, কিছু কিছু জায়গায় সে ধারাবাহিকতাকে ভেঙে দিচ্ছে। এবং সর্বক্ষেত্রে এই যে বিভিন্ন স্কুলগুলো একে অপরের বিরুদ্ধে দাঁড়িয়ে আছে না সমাহারে দাঁড়িয়ে আছে, এই আলোচনা করতে গিয়ে আসছে একটা অনন্য বিষয়, সেটা হচ্ছে গান্ধী। গান্ধীকে কোথায় অবস্থিত করা যায়? কোথাওই করা যায়। পাশ্চাত্য দৃষ্টিভঙ্গিগুলোর মারফতে গান্ধীকে করা যায় না, তার কারণ গান্ধীর নিজস্ব যে একটা দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি, সেটাই এই জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলনকে যদি গান্ধীর দৃষ্টিভঙ্গি থেকে দেখা যায় একটা অনন্যতা দেয়। আর আরেকটা যেটা নির্ঝর স্যার বললেন, আমার সহকর্মী, যে এই যে রাষ্ট্র, সাম্রাজ্য, জাতি, এই তিনটের মধ্যে যে একটা বিতর্ক, এইটা কিন্তু নিঃসন্দেহে জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলনের একটা অবদান। এবং এই যে বিতর্কটা, এটা কিন্তু ভবিষ্যতে মানে বর্তমানে আমাদের স্বাধীনতা উত্তর পর্যায়ে ভারতবর্ষে বিভিন্ন গবেষণার বিষয় হয়ে দাঁড়িয়েছে। এই মতাদর্শটা, জাতীয়তাবাদী মতাদর্শ এবং তার উপর থেকে গড়ে ওঠা যে জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলন, এই দুটো কিন্তু এই যে একটা ঐতিহাসিক প্রক্রিয়া, এটার মারফতই কিন্তু এই বিতর্কটি এসেছে এবং তার থেকেই আরো বেশি সমসাময়িক গবেষণা উঠে এসেছে। এবার আমি আমার বক্তব্য এখানেই শেষ করলাম, সামারিটা এখানেই শেষ করলাম। আমি এবার প্রশ্নোত্তর পর্বে যাচ্ছি। স্যার, আই এম নাও মুভিং টু দ্য কোয়েশ্চেন আনসার phase. There are certain questions. I'll ask you as I have got them accordingly. There is a question asked by Siddika Khatun. Siddika Khatun has asked the question that how relevant is the national movement in case of current politics? And see, she also has another question, that is, did national movement influence the politics of the Indian National Congress?
So far as Indian any present politics, present India is concerned, if you minus the Indian national movement, you cannot understand present. Whatever is happening today, somewhere, somewhat, all started during the course of Indian national movement. Some got distorted, some still streamlined in their course of action. We got the political freedom, but the nation is still in the process of making. The foundation has been laid down during the Indian national movement. The building we have to create right now. How many politicians presently, they know the each and everything. Even I have asked a question to a very senior congressman, is there any difference between Indian National Congress and Congress I? He got confused. Without understanding Indian national movement, you cannot solve the present problem. It is very easy to allege anybody for anything. Communalism, casteism. Why we should, I think, peep into the whole Indian national movement at that time, what we have initiated, because Britishers are ready to take advantage of our each and every weakness. How many politicians of the present day they knows about the Indian national movement? No, they are totally blank. बेटे, what is your Siddhika Khatun? India, without knowing whatever the distortion is taking place today, it is because of the no knowledge of Indian national movement to these politicians. Totally relevant. We cannot think the present India, because foundation, without assessing our foundation, how we can create a building over there? Is that clear? And what is your second question?
So her second question is that how far the Indian national movement influenced the politics of the Indian National Congress?
So far, Indian national politics of Indian National Congress, on some point of time, Indian national movement became synonym to the politics of Indian National Congress. You followed my point? During the whole course of Indian national movement, we have you can say, point of time where it looks like Indian National Congress means Indian national movement. Indian national movement means Indian National Congress. But it's not a whole truth. A mighty river cannot build without having a tributaries. Some very long tributaries, some very short tributaries. Indian national movement is a multifarious, is a multi-facets movement. And if you confine the Indian national movement only with the politics, in the politics of the Indian National Congress, so you are not going to justice with the Indian national movement. You followed my point?
So the next question comes from Otonu Dash, whose question is, what was the main cause of Gandhiji's popularity? And he also has a second question, is that how far our revolutionaries rectify and terrify the British?
So far as the Gandhi, ma'am, what's the first question? How far Gandhi? Please repeat the first question, ma'am.
So the first question is, what was the reason of Gandhiji's popularity?
The only reason of the Gandhi's popularity is he never demarcated himself separately. He always became a part of the Indian masses. He always attempted to address the common people. Because of this approach, everybody, whether he literate or illiterate, they considered Gandhi near to him. And I suggest you in this regard, you go through the proceedings of the second round table conference, and you also go through the newspaper of the London during this period, how Gandhi approached there, how Gandhi reached there, and what was the reaction in England. Gandhi never make himself exclusive. वो जिद्दी था, ये मैं एग्री करता हूं इस बात से, लेकिन he never make himself out of this. Second question, ma'am.
So the second question was, how far did the revolutionaries rectify and terrify the British?
You know, Britishers, I can't say to a greater extent, but Britishers to some extent they got I think we should not use word this rectify. They never rectify Britishers, but they terrified the Britishers to some extent. When such type of the bomb cases happened in India, they started to think it may be possible, like Irish army, here's a sort of the violent, you can say the reactions of the Indians would have taken place. They terrified the Britishers. I have gone through one, you can say the memoirs of one British officials. वो जब भी बाहर जाता था, he started to get afraid कहीं कोई मुझे मार ना डाले, कहीं मुझे मार ना डाले. Such sort of the feeling. कोरोना जितना डराया नहीं था, लेकिन कुछ तो डरा हुआ था. Clear? और रेक्टिफाई नहीं कर पाए. नो, इसमें मैं बिल्कुल एग्री नहीं करूंगा, बिकॉज गांधी ने यही बात की, और भी यही बात थी कि भाई ऐसा है कि आप इफ यू किल वन, दे इन रिटेलिएशन दे किल 4 or 5. But by claiming this, they cannot ratify, they couldn't ratify the Britishers. I'm not minimizing their role. A body is having a different organs, and all these organs are responsible too. That's why I have said, I have emphasized, Indian national movement is multifacets. Next question.
So the next question is asked by a student. He is asking that how far is it justified to call Gandhiji the father of the nation?
I have gone through almost all the writings of Gandhi. I have never come across a single reference where Gandhi was thinking to have some award. So far as a nation is always having some decorative cheese, some sort of the things. I think he was declared as a father of nation. On one point, I'm agree, at least here, his methodology, his ideology, his perception about the life we should follow. But on the other end, this you can say declaration of the father of nation remain decorative. I'm not convinced by this. Why it is decorative? Because we are not ready to 2nd October में हम वो function करेंगे, ये करेंगे, वो करेंगे. It's all formalities. May I ask one thing?
Yes.
If you would like to follow your late grandfather, or you just keep a photo in your room?
Definitely, sir.
This is the thing. If it's a father of nation, have you gone through? I think, my dear students, you should get impressed by writing, not by face, not by अरे उसने क्या कह दिया और क्या dialogue मार दिया. It's all rubbish. Clear?
Yes. So the next question is asked by Gargida. She's a fifth sem student, honors student. Now she's asking the question that was the national movement in any ways, did it lead to the growth of a Muslim nation of Pakistan? Because mostly the movement was relevant to enlarge Hindu culture and save Hindu areas. So did it in any way trigger the growth of a separate Muslim nation?
Ma'am, it's a hard reality.
Yes.
Indian national movement gave the birth to this. And partition is also in my perception, partition is a very sad outcome of the Indian national movement. You know, in this Indian national movement, sometimes we fail to control the flow. Sometimes the personal ambitions became so high, these personal ambitions started to hijack the Indian national movement. These personal ambitions sometimes became so high, they started to encroach the, you can say, the base of Indian national movement. It's a hard reality, my dear students. Indian national movement gave the birth to the communalism and partition and the formation of Pakistan. That's why Gandhi was murdered.
So shall I move to the next question?
Okay, ma'am.
The next question is, Gargi says thank you to sir for such a wonderful explanation. S.K. Das, he's asking that how far is Gandhiji's thinking relevant at the present context?
Gandhi's teaching tells us how to live collectively. Gandhi teaches us how to respect other religion. Gandhi teaches us how to minimize our violence. Gandhi's teaching are very relevant even today. His life also teaches us that after some time we should dedicate ourselves for the common cause, for the nation, for the whole community. Gandhi always remained relevant, like Buddha, Mahatma Buddha. You know, of course we are humans, but we have also evolved from the animals. We have an inherent violence nature. Gandhi teaches us how to minimize it. Gandhi always remained. I tell you one thing, I'm not infatuated. I'm logically talking about Gandhi. ये ना हो कि बच्चे कहें ये तो गांधी के बड़े जी मैम नेक्स्ट मैम.
So with that, we almost come to the end of today's lecture and the interactive question answer session as sir done. It was a very interesting and as well as a very engaging sort of lecture, whereby we came to know the in-depth intricacies of not just the national movement. I mean, what happened when Quit India happened, when non-cooperation happened. These are things like historical chronology, which is just some sort of data that is stored in the. Also, there is a last question. Can I just ask you one?
Yeah. Oh, of course, ma'am.
Right.
I know.
Shushmita Shamonto, the question is, what's the difference between the present national movement versus the earlier national movement?
Do you think we have a present national movement?
I don't understand that.
Nothing today exists like national movement. Whatever exists today, myself, my family, and then my political party, there is nation. Sorry to say, I'm very hard to answer this question, but there is no national movement. Unfortunately, we have, you can say, diverted from some part. This diversion is a temporary. I'm not talking about BJP. I'm not talking about some particular political party. All these political parties are staffed by us.
Exactly.
If I'm diverted, wherever I go, I always carry this divergence.
Definitely, sir. So, just in a way to round up the whole discussion, it's like sir's analysis is something which opens up venues for more research, more analysis, and this is where his expertise lies. The mentor is always expert in opening genres for further thinking. And I'm very sure after today's lecture, we will be seeing the nationalist movement, the national fervor from some different angles. We will think rather about what actually it was, what are the schools that analyzing the national movement actually wants to say, and in what context. The author who is writing about the movement is writing in what context. What was his preference, his bias? This is a very important point. তো আজকের যে আমাদের আলোচনা পর্যালোচনা মোটামুটি এখানেই সমাপ্ত। আমি একটু জাস্ট আবার একটু সামারি করে দেব, একটু সারাংশ করে দেব। সেটা হচ্ছে এই যে স্যার যে আজকে বললেন, আজকে উনার বক্তৃতার মারফতে আমরা শুধু যে সমৃদ্ধ হলাম তাই নয়, আমরা ভবিষ্যতে এই জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলন, জাতীয়তাবাদী মতাদর্শকে, জাতীয়তাবাদকে একটা নতুন দৃষ্টিকোণ দিয়ে ভাবতে শুরু করব। যে সমস্ত বই এই জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলন ও মতাদর্শকে পর্যালোচনা করে সেইগুলোর প্রেক্ষিতটা ভাবতে শুরু করব। প্রেক্ষিতটা বা প্রেক্ষাপটটা ভীষণ গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। কোন লেখক কোন প্রেক্ষিতে কোন প্রেক্ষাপটে বসে জাতীয়তাবাদী আন্দোলনকে বা জাতীয়তাবাদী মতাদর্শকে পর্যালোচনা করছে সেটা না বুঝলে আমরা আসল সত্যটাতে উপনীত হতে পারবো না। এটাই আমাদের আজকের সমালোচনার মূল রসদ। এবং একজন এমিনেন্ট স্পিকার, একজন সুবক্তা শুধু নন, একজন গুরু হিসেবে যেটা মূল আধার সেটা হচ্ছে তিনি সবসময় চেষ্টা করেন শিষ্যকে নতুন আঙ্গিকে ভাবনার চিন্তা দিতে, নতুন গবেষণার রসদ দিতে, যেটা আজকে আমাদের স্যার নিঃসন্দেহে ভাবে করেছেন। এবার আমি রিকোয়েস্ট করছি আমার স্যার, আমাদের হেড অফ দ্য ডিপার্টমেন্ট আশিস নন্দী স্যারকে দুটো কথা বলতে, একটা সারাংশ মতো। নাও আই রিকোয়েস্ট মাই হেড অফ দ্য ডিপার্টমেন্ট ডক্টর আশিস নন্দী টু প্লিজ present a vote of thanks to our eminent speaker.
It is really a fantastic experience for all of us to hear from Professor Pandit. He has lucidly explained and analyzed the different approaches. I was very eager to listen from you. This area, different approaches and different schools of our national movement, and touch various aspects of it. I hope this valuable lecture would provide a new quest of analysis and research in this field. I would like to thank Professor Pandit from our heart. We express our gratitude towards him. I would also request him to respond to the call of our students in future. I also thank all the participants, students, my colleagues, teachers from other colleges for joining this webinar. I believe your active participation would motivate our organizers to arrange many such lectures in future. Thank you all. আমি একটুখানি বলে দিই ঋতব্রত ছেলে মেয়েদেরকে যে আজকের যে আলোচনাটা তো মানে অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি খুব ইগার ছিলাম যে ন্যাশনাল মুভমেন্ট সম্পর্কে অলমোস্ট আমাদের প্রত্যেকেরই কিছু না কিছু ধারণা আছে। এটা খুব বেনিফিশিয়াল হতো ফর দ্য জিই স্টুডেন্টস, কারণ ওদের সিলেবাসের একদম প্রথমেই ডিফারেন্ট অ্যাপ্রোচেস এই ব্যাপারটা ন্যাশনালিস্ট মুভমেন্টটা ছিল, কিন্তু দুঃখের বিষয় আমরা তো ওদেরকে ইনক্লুড করতে পারিনি। তা ব্যাপারটা
জয়েন করেছে স্যার, আমি
ও,
আমার
তাহলে তো খুব-
ক্লাস ছিল, আমি বলেছি ওদেরকে লিংকও দিয়েছি এবং ওদের মধ্যে বেশ
বাহ, বাহ, বাহ।
জয়েন করেছে।
তাহলে ওরা বেনিফিটেড হবে, কারণ এই বিষয়টা ওদের সিলেবাসের মধ্যে আছে। এবং ওনার যে আলোচনা, এই আলোচনার নতুন নতুন দিক যেমন আছে, প্রশ্নও অনেক আছে, এগুলো নিয়ে আমরা ভাববো আগামী দিনে, তাহলে আমরা আরো সমৃদ্ধ হব। এবং আমি যারা আমার ছাত্রছাত্রীরা এখানে আছো প্রত্যেককে ধন্যবাদ দেব এবং আশা করব আগামী দিনে আমাদের পথ চলায় তোমরা একইভাবে অংশগ্রহণ করে এই উদ্যোগকে সফল করবে। এবং আগামী দিনের যে প্রোগ্রামগুলো ঋতব্রতা, অভিক, হুমায়ুন তারা আছে, তারা বলে দিও, এর পরে পরে আমাদের যেগুলো হবে এই মুহূর্তে নেই। And lastly, I would again thank Professor Pandhir for your valuable speech. Many, many thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for providing such an opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ritubrata ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
ঋতব্রতা স্যারকে ছেড়ে দাও।
It was really a pleasure listening, seeing and hearing you. Sir, from all of us here, we would like to have your cooperation in the future.
Okay, ma'am. Anytime. I'm thorough. I'm totally dedicated. You know, this is our new generation,
Yes.
and our future is totally based on them. We have already played our innings. Okay, ma'am. Anytime. Any. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Nandi Saab. Okay.
See you again, sir. Thank you.
See you again, sir.
See you.